The rain had stopped, but Seoul still glistened like it couldn't decide whether to rest or weep. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood at the emergency room doors, watching the city blur through her exhaustion. 22 hours on her feet. 22 hours of trying to save lives with equipment held together by prayers and determination. Her blonde hair hung limp around her face, and her scrubs carried the evidence of too many lost battles. 3 months in Seoul. 3 months since she'd fled Chicago, with nothing but a suitcase and a name that no hospital in America would hire anymore. The review board had been very clear about that. One mistake, one moment of trusting the wrong person, and 17 years of perfect service meant nothing. Richard Hayes, chief of surgery, pillar of the community, had made sure of that. When she'd discovered he was selling opioids from the hospital supply, when she'd tried to report it, he'd turned it all around, made it look like she was the one stealing, the one selling. His word against hers, and his word came with golf club memberships and 40 years of connections. Doctors Without Borders didn't care about suspended licenses or pending investigations. They just needed skilled hands willing to work in impossible conditions. So here she was, in Seoul's poorest district, patching bullet wounds and pretending she didn't recognize the gang tattoos, pretending she couldn't spot the signs of organized crime that reminded her too much of the corruption she'd fled. She should have taken the main road home. She should have waited for the morning when the streets would be full of people heading to work. But exhaustion made her stupid, and the alley would cut 15 minutes off her journey to the cramped apartment she could barely afford. The sound came first, wet and labored, the distinctive wheeze of punctured lungs trying to draw air. Sarah's feet stopped before her mind caught up. Down the alley, barely visible in the shadows between garbage bins, someone was dying. Every intelligent thought told her to walk away. This was Seoul's underworld bleeding out in front of her. Getting involved would only bring trouble she couldn't afford. But her hands were already reaching for the medical bag she always carried, muscle memory stronger than self-preservation. 2 gunshot wounds, professional work, meant to kill slowly. One through the shoulder, one that had caught the edge of the liver, blood pooled black in the dim light, spreading across wet concrete like spilled ink. The man was Korean, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than she made in a month. His face turned toward the brick wall. Sarah knelt in the blood and got to work. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, pressing gauze, checking vitals, doing triage with the limited supplies she carried. When she turned his face toward her to check his pupils, her breath caught. He was beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful. All dangerous power barely contained. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and even unconscious, an aura that screamed predator. His eyes opened as she worked, dark and unfocused, trying to track her movement. "Don't try to speak," she said in her limited Korean, focusing on the arterial bleed that would kill him in minutes if she didn't get it under control. "Save your strength." His hand caught her wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to make her freeze. His lips moved, and she had to lean close to hear the word he whispered, "Mine." Then his grip loosened, and his eyes rolled back. Sarah returned to her work, pushing aside the strange flutter in her chest. Delirious patients said all kinds of things. It meant nothing. She was so focused on stemming the blood flow that she didn't hear them coming until it was too late. 3 men materialized from the shadows, all in black, all moving with military precision. Sarah's hands stilled on her patient. There was nowhere to run. "Step away from him," one said in accented English. "He'll die if I stop now," Sarah replied, surprised by her own steady voice. 3 more minutes and he might survive transport. The man pulled out a phone, had a rapid conversation in Korean, then nodded. "Continue." Sarah bent back to her work, hyper-aware of the guns pointed at her, of the danger crackling in the air like electricity before lightning strikes. She did what she could with what she had, then sat back on her heels. "He needs real surgery," she said. "A hospital, or he won't make it through the night." "No hospitals, you come with us." It wasn't a request. Sarah found herself bundled into a black car that smelled of leather and gun oil, the dying man's head in her lap as Seoul blurred past tinted windows. She kept her fingers on his pulse, monitoring his breathing, trying not to think about the fact that she'd just been kidnapped by what was obviously organized crime. The building they took her to scraped the sky, all glass and steel, and the kind of wealth that never asked permission. A private elevator rose so high her ears popped. The penthouse that emerged was something from a magazine, marble and modern art, and a view of Seoul that should have taken her breath away if she wasn't so terrified. They had a medical room, better equipped than the emergency room she'd just left. Sarah didn't ask questions, just got to work properly this time. The bullets came out clean. She sutured and stitched for 2 hours, fighting to save a man she didn't know. A man who was probably better off dead given the life he clearly led. But she was a doctor. She didn't get to make those choices. When she finally stepped back, peeling off bloody gloves, dawn was breaking over Seoul. The man would live, though recovery would be long and painful. Several ribs were cracked, the liver would need weeks to heal properly, and she'd had to do reconstruction on the shoulder that would require months of physical therapy. "You can go," the guard said, the same one who'd spoken English in the alley. "A car will take you home. Speak of this to no one." Sarah nodded, gathering her things. She was almost to the elevator when a voice, rough with pain and medication, stopped her. "Wait." She turned. The man was awake, which he shouldn't be with the amount of morphine she'd given him. His dark eyes tracked her movement with unsettling focus. "You need rest," she said automatically. The damage was extensive. Moving could tear the sutures. "Your name," he said in perfect English, only slightly slurred from the drugs. "Tell me your name." "Sarah." Dr. Sarah Mitchell. He studied her for a long moment. American, running from something. It wasn't a question. Sarah's spine stiffened. "I should go. You saved my life, Dr. Sarah Mitchell." His voice carried an odd weight, like he was making a declaration rather than stating a fact. "In my world, that creates a debt." "There's no debt. I'm a doctor. It's what I do." "No." His eyes sharpened despite the morphine. "You could have walked away, should have walked away, but you knelt in my blood and brought me back. That means something." Sarah didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. "You'll be back," he said with absolute certainty. "I don't think so." "You will." There was no threat in it, just certainty. "I always pay my debts, doctor. And you. You interest me." Sarah left without responding, but his words followed her home, echoing in her mind as she showered off his blood and tried to pretend the last few hours hadn't happened. 3 days passed. Sarah worked her shifts, ate her simple meals, and told herself the strange encounter was over. Then she came home to find a black envelope slipped under her door. Inside, a single line of elegant handwriting and an address. "You're needed. Come alone." She should have thrown it away. Should have packed her bags and run to another city, another country. But there was something about the formal politeness of the request, the fact that they'd asked instead of simply taking her again. And despite everything, she was curious about whether her patient had survived. The same building, the same private elevator, but this time she walked in of her own free will. The penthouse was quiet, afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The guard from before was waiting. "This way, doctor." He was in the medical room, propped up in bed, looking pale but alert. The monitors showed stable vitals, but Sarah could see the strain in his face, the careful way he held himself. "You're Han," he said to the guard. "Leave us." When they were alone, he gestured to a chair beside the bed. "Thank you for coming. Your note was rather cryptic. I needed to see you again." He studied her with those impossible dark eyes. "To thank you properly, and to make you an offer. I don't want your money." "Not money." He shifted carefully, suppressing a wince. "A position. I need a private physician. Someone skilled, discreet, and unafraid of blood." Sarah almost laughed. "You want to hire me as your personal mob doctor?" "I want to offer you protection, resources, and the chance to practice medicine, without the constraints that I'm guessing drove you from America." The accuracy of the guess made her stomach clench. "You had me investigated." "Of course." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, formerly of Chicago Presbyterian. 17 years of exemplary service, 3 commendations for innovation in trauma surgery, and then suddenly, disgrace. License suspended pending investigation into drug theft that you clearly didn't commit. "You don't know that." "I know lies when I see them, doctor. Someone powerful wanted you destroyed." The evidence was too neat, too perfect. In my experience, the truth is always messier. Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. It doesn't matter now. Doesn't it? You're here, working for pennies in a clinic that can barely keep its doors open, wasting your talent because one man decided you knew too much. And you're different? You're not a dangerous man who destroys people who get in his way? He smiled then, and it was sharp as a blade. Oh, I'm exactly that, doctor. The difference is, you'd be under my protection, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. There it was again, that word, mine. I'm not a possession to be owned. No, he agreed, but you could be an ally. My name is Kang Ji-hoon, and I run half of Seoul's underworld. I have enemies who would love to see me bleed out in an alley. I need someone I can trust to keep me alive. And you trust me, you don't even know me. You had my life in your hands. You could have let me die. Could have made it look like you tried to save me. No one would have questioned it. Instead, you fought for 3 hours to keep my heart beating. That tells me everything I need to know. Sarah stood to leave. I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't be part of this. The offer stands, Ji-hoon said as she reached the door. When you realize that running isn't living, when you're tired of being afraid, you know where to find me. 2 weeks passed. Sarah told herself she'd made the right choice. She worked extra shifts, exhausted herself so thoroughly that she fell into bed without dreams, but the clinic's equipment kept failing. They ran out of basic supplies. She watched a child almost die because they didn't have the right antibiotics, saved only by a last-minute donation from an anonymous benefactor that arrived just in time. She knew who the benefactor was. Just like she knew who was behind the sudden increase in security around the clinic, the way the local gangs suddenly gave the building a wide berth, the way her walk home had become mysteriously safer. He was protecting her anyway, without asking for anything in return. The 3rd week, she found herself in the elevator again. Ji-hoon was out of bed this time, standing by the windows in an elegant suit that couldn't quite hide the careful way he moved. He turned when she entered, and something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. The child lived, he said without preamble. The one who needed the antibiotics. You've been watching the clinic. I've been watching you. He moved closer, still favoring his injured side. You work yourself to exhaustion. You give everything and ask for nothing. You're drowning, doctor, and too proud to take the hand that's offered. Why do you care? Because you saved my life. Because you're brilliant and wasted in that place. Because, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because from the moment I opened my eyes in that alley and saw an angel covered in my blood, fighting to keep me breathing, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, Sarah's heart stuttered. That's the trauma talking. Florence Nightingale syndrome. Is it? Then why are you here? She didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, she had too many answers, none of them safe. 6 months, she heard herself say. I'll work for you for 6 months. Medical care only, nothing illegal. And I want resources to help the clinic too, not just your organization. Done. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His grip was warm, solid, real, in a way that made her realize how numb she'd been feeling. When do I start? Now, Ji-hoon said, and his thumb brushed across her knuckles before he let go. Let me show you what you'll be working with. The medical facility he'd built was extraordinary. Not just the room she'd seen before, but an entire wing of the penthouse converted into a state-of-the-art medical suite, operating room, recovery ward, pharmacy stocked with everything she could need. It was nicer than most hospitals she'd worked in. This is impossible, she breathed, running her hand along a piece of equipment that cost more than most people's houses. The money, this must have cost. Money is just paper, doctor. Life is irreplaceable. Your life, you mean, lives, he corrected. My men, their families, people under my protection who can't go to hospitals because of who they are or what they've done. You'll be busy. Sarah turned to look at him. This isn't just about having a private physician. No, he admitted. It's about building something better. The man you saved in that alley isn't a good man, doctor. I've done things that would horrify you, but I'm trying to be more. To build something that protects as much as it destroys. I think you could help with that. You want me to be your conscience? I want you to be yourself. Brilliant, compassionate, uncompromising. I've surrounded myself with people who tell me what I want to hear. I think. I need someone who'll tell me the truth. It was manipulation, Sarah knew. Everything about Kang Ji-hoon was calculated, designed to get what he wanted. But there was something else too, buried under the dangerous charm. A loneliness she recognized, the exhaustion of wearing masks until you forgot what your real face looked like. All right, she said. But I have rules. Of course you do. I don't participate in violence. I heal whoever needs healing, regardless of which side they're on. And we keep things professional between us. Something flickered in his eyes at the last part. If that's what you want. It is. Then welcome to my world, Dr. Mitchell. The first month was an adjustment. Sarah learned the rhythm of Ji-hoon's empire, the ebb and flow of violence that seemed almost choreographed. She treated knife wounds and bullet holes, broken bones and bruised ribs. Ji-hoon's men were respectful, almost reverential, calling her doctor with the same tone they used for boss. She learned that Han was more than a bodyguard. He was Ji-hoon's oldest friend, the closest thing to family he had. She learned that the penthouse had belonged to Ji-hoon's father, another crime lord who died when Ji-hoon was 17, leaving him to fight for control of the empire or die trying. She learned that every scar on his body had a story, and most of them were about survival rather than conquest. She also learned that keeping things professional was harder than she'd expected. Ji-hoon had a way of being present without crowding, of making her feel seen without staring. He'd appear in the medical suite while she was organizing supplies, asking questions about procedures with genuine interest. He'd send her articles about new surgical techniques, have rare medical texts delivered because he'd heard her mention them. He never crossed the line she'd drawn, but he walked right up to it, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell his expensive cologne mixed with something darker, more dangerous. The second month, everything changed. Sarah was reviewing patient files when Han burst in, supporting a young woman who was bleeding heavily from multiple wounds. She was conscious but barely, her eyes rolling back as Sarah guided them to the examination table. What happened? Min's men, Han said tersely. She's one of our informants. They found out. Sarah worked quickly, assessing the damage. Multiple lacerations, defensive wounds on her hands and arms, and something worse, bruising that spoke of other violations. The girl couldn't have been more than 20. Get Ji-hoon, Sarah said, not looking up from her work. Now. He came immediately, took one look at the girl on the table, and his face went cold in a way Sarah hadn't seen before. This wasn't the controlled violence of a crime lord. This was rage, pure and burning. Her name is Sunny, he said quietly. She's 19. She was getting information about a trafficking ring Min runs. Trafficking? Sarah's hands didn't stop moving, suturing and cleaning, but her stomach churned. Human trafficking? Children, specifically. Ji-hoon's voice was deadly quiet. I've been working to shut it down. Sunny volunteered to go undercover. This is my fault. Sarah wanted to say something comforting, but she was too busy trying to save Sunny's life. The girl had lost a lot of blood, and some of the wounds were deep. It took 2 hours of careful work before she was stable. She'll live, Sarah said finally, pulling off bloody gloves. But she'll need time to heal, both physically and otherwise. Ji-hoon nodded, his eyes never leaving Sunny's unconscious form. Han, double the guard. No one gets near her without my permission. When Han left, Ji-hoon turned to Sarah. This is what I am, doctor. This is the world you've entered. Still think you can handle it? Are you really trying to stop the trafficking? Yes. Why? What's in it for you? Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. My mother was 13 when she was sold to my father. 13 years old, and he thought he owned her. She survived, even learned to love him eventually, or so she said. But I watched what it did to her, the way she flinched at sudden movements even years later, the way she cried in her sleep. When I took over, I swore I'd never allow it in my territory. But Min is a problem that needs solving. The cold was back in his voice. And he will be solved. Tonight. You're going after him. Yes. Sarah grabbed his arm as he turned to leave. You're not fully healed. Your shoulder, the strain could tear everything I repaired. Some things are worth the pain, doctor. She should have let him go. Should have maintained that professional distance she'd insisted on. Instead, she heard herself saying, "Then I'm coming with you." Absolutely not. You'll need medical support. If things go wrong. Things will definitely go wrong, which is why you're staying here. He pulled free of her grip, but gently. I can't do what needs to be done if I'm worried about you. I can take care of myself. Not in my world, you can't. He moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You want to know the real reason I keep you at a distance, doctor. It's not respect for your rules. It's because the moment I let myself touch you the way I want to, you become a target. Every enemy I have will see you as a way to hurt me, and they'll be right. Sarah's breath caught. Ji-hoon, stay here, keep Sunny alive, let me do what I do best. He reached up, his thumb brushing her cheek so gently it might have been imagination. Let me be the monster so you can stay the angel. He was gone before she could respond, leaving Sarah touching her cheek and trying to pretend her heart wasn't racing. The hours crawled. Sarah stayed with Sunny, monitoring her vitals, changing bandages, trying not to think about what was happening out in the city. Sunny woke once, confused and frightened, and Sarah held her hand, humming softly until she slipped back into healing sleep. It was nearly dawn when Ji-hoon returned. He was blood-splattered and exhausted, favoring his shoulder, but alive. His eyes found Sarah immediately, something raw and vulnerable flickering across his face before the mask slipped back into place. It's done, he said simply. Min won't hurt anyone else. Your shoulder is fine. Let me look. He submitted to her examination, sitting still as she checked the damage. He'd torn 2 stitches, but nothing critical. As she worked to repair them, she was acutely aware of his eyes on her face, the way his breathing changed when her fingers brushed his skin. Sunny will recover, she said, needing to fill the charged silence. Physically, at least. I'll make sure she gets whatever help she needs. The best therapists, a safe place to stay, anything. That's unexpectedly kind. I'm not kind, doctor. I'm practical. She risked everything to help me. I pay my debts. Sarah finished with the stitches and stepped back. You should rest. So should you. You've been up all night. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it right. He stood, and for a moment they were too close, the air between them electric. Thank you, for saving her, for being here. It's my job. No, he said softly, it's who you are. Even when you're exhausted, even when it's dangerous, you can't help but save people. It's beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Sarah didn't know what to say to that. She felt exposed, like he could see through all her defenses to the scared, lonely woman underneath. I should check on Sunny, she said, stepping back. Doctor. His voice stopped her at the door. My offer stands. Not the job. You already have that. The other offer. To give you everything. To make you mine. To worship you the way you deserve. Whenever you're ready to stop running, I'll be here. Sarah fled, but his words followed her, burrowing under her skin like splinters of desire. The 3rd month, the walls she'd built started crumbling. It started small, Ji-hoon bringing her coffee exactly how she liked it during long nights in the medical suite. Sarah finding excuses to check on his shoulder even though it had fully healed. Conversations that started about medical supplies and wandered into philosophy, literature, the kind of people they might have been in another life. She learned he spoke 4 languages, had a master's degree in business from Harvard, that he'd earned before his father died, and the crown of the underworld fell on his head. He learned she'd grown up poor in Chicago, that she'd fought for every scholarship, every opportunity, that saving lives wasn't just a job but a calling that consumed her. The tension between them grew with each passing day, a living thing that filled every room they shared. Sarah caught herself watching him when he wasn't looking, admiring the graceful violence in the way he moved, the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the unexpected gentleness he showed to those under his protection. She was falling for him. The realization hit her one night as she watched him read to Sunny, who'd become a permanent resident of the penthouse while she recovered. His voice was soft, patient, and when Sunny fell asleep, he carefully tucked the blanket around her with a tenderness that made Sarah's chest ache. You'd make a good father, she said without thinking. Jihoon looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Children aren't possible in my world, doctor. They'd be targets from the moment they drew breath. That's a lonely way to live. I'm used to lonely. He stood, moving closer to her. Or I was, until a beautiful doctor started haunting my home with her presence, making me want things I can't have. Jihoon. 3 months, doctor. 3 months of watching you save lives, of seeing your compassion even for those who don't deserve it. 3 months of torture, being so close and not being able to touch you the way I want to. You said it yourself, it would make me a target. You already are. My enemies know about you. They know you matter to me. The only question is whether we're going to keep pretending otherwise. Sarah's heart was racing. I can't be with someone who kills people. I know. I can't compromise my ethics. I wouldn't want you to. This is impossible. Yes, he agreed, moving even closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Completely impossible. So tell me to walk away, doctor. Tell me to leave you alone, and I will. I'll be your employer, nothing more. Just say the words. Sarah opened her mouth to say them. To be sensible, safe, smart. Instead, she heard herself whisper, I can't. Jihoon's control snapped. He pulled her against him, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pressed against her lower back. But he didn't kiss her. Not yet. He held her there, their lips a breath apart, waiting. Last chance, he murmured against her mouth. Once I kiss you, there's no going back. You'll be mine, completely and irrevocably. I don't share, I don't let go, and I'll destroy anyone who tries to take you from me. Is that what you want, doctor? To belong to a monster? You're not a monster, Sarah breathbird. You're a man trying to be better. That's all any of us are. Sarah. Her name on his lips was prayer and possession combined. Kiss me, she whispered. Show me what it means to be yours. The kiss was nothing like she'd expected. She'd thought he'd be rough, demanding, claiming her with the same violence that colored his world. Instead, he was achingly gentle, his lips moving against hers with reverence, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. His tongue swept into her mouth when she opened for him, tasting, exploring, making her knees weak with the tenderness of it. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. My room, he said, and it wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, beyond words, beyond thought. He led her through the penthouse to a door she'd never entered, his private sanctuary. The room was surprisingly simple, all clean lines and muted colors, dominated by a bed that looked big enough to get lost in. Are you sure? He asked, his hands framing her face. We can wait. We can. Sarah silenced him with another kiss, pouring all her need, her loneliness, her desperate desire to feel alive again into the contact. When they broke apart, his control was visibly fraying. I need you, she admitted. I've needed you since that first night, when you looked at me like I was your salvation instead of just another doctor doing her job. Jihoon made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a groan. Then his hands were everywhere, gentle but insistent, and Sarah let herself fall into sensation, into the safety of his dangerous embrace. They made love like it was both the first and last time, desperate and tender in equal measure. Jihoon mapped every inch of her body with his hands and mouth, whispering praise in Korean and English, making her feel worshipped, cherished, owned in the most beautiful way. When he finally slid inside her, they both stilled, overwhelmed by the perfection of the connection. Then he was moving, and she was meeting him stroke for stroke, and the world narrowed to just this, just them, just the impossible rightness of two broken people making each other whole. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Sarah's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slowly return to normal. His fingers combed through her hair, and she felt more at peace than she had in years. What happens now? She asked. Now you're mine, he said simply, and I'm yours. Everything I have, everything I am, it's yours. I can't change who you are, what you do. I'm not asking you to, but you've already changed me, doctor. Made me want to be better, to build something more than just an empire of fear. Sarah lifted her head to look at him. What do you mean? I've been thinking about your clinic, about all the people who need help but can't afford it. What if we could do more? Not just donations, but something bigger? Like what? A trauma center. Free healthcare for anyone who needs it, no questions asked. Funded by my less legitimate enterprises, but completely legal in its operation. You could run it, save lives on a scale that little clinic could never match. Sarah stared at him. You're serious. I've already bought the building, had architects draw up plans. All it needs is your yes. This is insane. You can't just build me a hospital because we slept together. Ji-hoon's hand cupped her face. I'm building it because you deserve to practice medicine without limits. Because the world needs more doctors like you. And yes, because I love you enough to give you your dreams, even if those dreams don't include me. Sarah's breath caught. You love me? Completely, desperately, with a fervor that should probably terrify. You. It does terrify me, she admitted. But not as much as the thought of living without you. Is that your way of saying you love me too, doctor? I love you, Sarah said, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff and learning to fly at the same time. God help me, I love you. Ji-hoon kissed her then, deep and possessive and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce with emotion. Then let me give you the world, Sarah. Let me turn all this blood and darkness into something beautiful. Together, she said. We build it together, or not at all. Together, he agreed. The fourth month brought challenges. News of their relationship spread through the underworld like wildfire. Some saw it as weakness, the mighty Kang Ji-hoon brought low by an American doctor. Others saw it as opportunity, a way to strike at him through her. The first attempt came on a Tuesday. Sarah was leaving the trauma center construction site when a van pulled up beside her. She had just enough time to recognize the danger before Han appeared, seemingly from nowhere, and disabled the would-be kidnappers with an efficiency that was beautiful and terrible to watch. Boss wants to see you, he said calmly, like he hadn't just beaten 3 men unconscious. Ji-hoon was pacing when she arrived at the penthouse, cold fury radiating from every line of his body. The moment he saw her, the ice cracked, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I'm okay, she said against his chest. Han was there, I'm fine. You could have been taken. Could have been hurt because of me. But I wasn't. He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. This is what I was afraid of. You being targeted because of what I feel for you. Did you think I didn't know the risks? I'm not naive, Ji-hoon. I knew what loving you would mean. Knowing and experiencing are different things. Then teach me, Sarah said. Teach me to protect myself. Make me less of a vulnerability. That's how she ended up training with Han every morning, learning self-defense, how to spot threats, how to use her medical knowledge as a weapon if necessary. She was a quick study, driven by the determination to not be a weakness in Ji-hoon's armor. The trauma center construction continued at a pace that seemed impossible. Ji-hoon threw money and resources at it like he was building a fortress instead of a hospital. In a way, Sarah supposed he was. A fortress of legitimacy, of redemption, of hope for something better. Sunny started helping at the construction site, having recovered physically, if not entirely emotionally, from her ordeal. She was studying to become a nurse, she told Sarah, inspired by the care she'd received. It was beautiful, watching her transform from victim to survivor to healer. The 5th month, everything accelerated. The rival families were consolidating, threatened by Ji-hoon's growing power and the changes he was making to the traditional order. The attacks became more frequent, more vicious. Sarah found herself treating more wounded, seeing more death, and still she stayed, because she could see what Ji-hoon was building. Not just the trauma center, but a different kind of criminal empire, still violent when necessary, still illegal in its operations, but with a code, with lines that couldn't be crossed. No trafficking, no drugs sold to children, protection for those who couldn't protect themselves. It wasn't good, could never be called good, but it was better. And sometimes better was all you could ask for in an imperfect world. One night, as she was stitching up one of Ji-hoon's lieutenants after a particularly brutal fight, the man said something that stuck with her. You've changed him, doctor, made him more human. Some of the old guard don't like it, think it makes him weak. But the younger ones, we see the truth. Mercy can be its own kind of strength. Sarah thought about those words as she watched Ji-hoon command his empire, the way he balanced violence and restraint, fear and respect. He was still dangerous, still capable of terrible things, but he was choosing to be more. The 6th month arrived with a marriage proposal, not a traditional one. Sarah woke to find Ji-hoon on the terrace, watching the sunrise over Seoul. When she joined him, wrapping a silk robe around herself against the morning chill, he pulled her against his chest, her back to his front, and held her while the city came alive below them. "I never expected this," he said quietly. "To find someone who could see past the blood, and find something worth saving. You saved yourself. I just gave you a reason to try. Marry me." Sarah's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me, Sarah. Not because it will protect you, though it will. Not because I want to own you, though God knows I want that too. Marry me, because I can't imagine a future without you in it. Because you've become the best part of me, the only clean thing in my dirty world." Sarah turned in his arms to face him. "Your world isn't dirty, it's complicated, morally gray. Sometimes dark, but it's also full of loyalty, protection, and a strange kind of honor. Is that a yes?" "Marriage is a big step. We've already taken all the big steps, doctor. You sleep in my bed, you know all my secrets, you've seen me at my worst and chosen to stay. The ring is just a formality at this point. A formality that tells the world I belong to you. And that I belong to you," he countered, "completely and irrevocably. Kill me if you want, leave me if you must, but I'll never be free of you. You're in my blood now, Sarah. Marry me and make it official." Sarah studied his face, this dangerous man who'd learned to be gentle for her, who was building her a hospital with blood money because he wanted her to save lives. It was insane. It was impossible. It was perfect. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." The kiss that followed was different from all the others. It was a claiming, a promise, a vow sealed with lips and tongues and the desperation of two people who'd found home in the last place they'd expected. They were married 3 weeks later, in a small ceremony in the penthouse. Han stood as Ji-hoon's witness, Sunny as Sarah's. It should have felt wrong, a doctor marrying a crime lord, pledging herself to a man who had blood on his hands. Instead, it felt like destiny, like all the broken roads of their lives had led them to this moment. That night, as Ji-hoon made love to her, with a tenderness that bordered on worship, Sarah understood something fundamental. Love wasn't always clean or easy, or morally pure. Sometimes it was messy and complicated and demanded you compromise parts of yourself, but if it was real, if it was true, it was worth the moral ambiguity. The 7th month brought an unexpected gift. Sarah was in the nearly completed trauma center when the call came. Richard Hayes had been arrested. The FBI had been investigating him for years, and they'd finally gathered enough evidence. Fraud, drug trafficking, embezzlement. The list went on. He was looking at 20 to life. "Did you do this?" Sarah asked Ji-hoon that night. "I may have provided some information to the right people. Anonymous tips about where to look, which accounts to investigate." He pulled her closer in bed. "He destroyed your life. I couldn't let that stand. You've been planning this since you found out. Since the day you told me what he did to you. Yes, it took time to do it properly, legally. Well, mostly legally. The FBI did the actual work. I just pointed them in the right direction." Sarah should have been disturbed by the calculated vengeance, the patient way he'd orchestrated Richard's downfall. Instead, she felt a savage satisfaction. Justice, even delivered by criminal hands, was still justice. "Thank you," she whispered. "You can go back now," Ji-hoon said quietly. "With Richard disgraced, your name will be cleared. You could practice in America again, have your old life back." Sarah rose up on her elbow to look at him. "Is that what you think I want? My old life? I want you to have choices. I choose you. I choose this life we're building together. I choose our morally complicated, strangely beautiful existence." She kissed him softly. "I choose to stay." Relief flickered across his face before he pulled her down for a deeper kiss. They made love slowly, savoring each other, celebrating the choice to stay, to build, to be together, despite all the reasons they shouldn't work. The 8th month, the trauma center opened. Sarah stood in scrubs again, her wedding ring on a chain around her neck, watching as the first patients arrived. They came in droves. The poor, the desperate, those who'd been turned away from other hospitals because they couldn't pay. Her staff was a mix of idealists like herself and those seeking redemption, doctors and nurses who'd made mistakes and needed second chances. Ji-hoon had been brilliant in his recruitment, finding medical professionals who wouldn't ask too many questions about the funding, who understood that sometimes good came from dark places. They were some of the best doctors Sarah had ever worked with, driven by the same desperate need to heal that drove her. That first day, they treated 43 patients. Gunshot wounds, sick children, pregnant women with no prenatal care, elderly people who'd been suffering in silence because they couldn't afford help. Sarah worked for 14 hours straight, and it was the best she'd felt in years. When she finally made it home to the penthouse, she found Ji-hoon waiting with champagne and her favorite takeout. He'd been there for the opening, cutting the ribbon with her, but had disappeared once the patients started arriving. His world and hers could overlap, but some boundaries needed to remain. 43 lives saved, he said, pulling her into his lap. In one day. Not all saved, but helped, yes. The foundation wants to build 2 more centers in other districts. Sarah pulled back to look at him. The foundation? The one I set up to fund the center. Completely legitimate, taxes paid, everything above board. The money gets cleaned through so many legal channels that by the time it reaches the center, it's spotless. You built me a money laundering operation disguised as charity? I built you a charity funded by money laundering. Subtle difference. Sarah laughed. She couldn't help it. The absurdity of their life, the strange morality of it all, was sometimes overwhelming. I love you, she said. You terrifying, brilliant, morally ambiguous man. And I love you, my beautiful life-saving, morally flexible wife. They were interrupted by Han clearing his throat from the doorway. Boss, the Yamamoto family is here. They're ready to negotiate. Ji-hoon sighed. I'll be right there. When Han left, he looked at Sarah. The Yamamotos control the eastern ports. If I can bring them into alliance, we can shut down the last of the trafficking routes. Go, Sarah said, kissing him softly. Go be terrifying and save some kids while you're at it. How did I get so lucky? He murmured against her lips. You got shot in an alley and happened to collapse near a doctor who makes bad choices. The best bad choice you ever made? The absolute best. The 9th month brought a revelation that changed everything. Sarah had been feeling off for weeks, tired, nauseous, emotional in ways that didn't make sense. She attributed it to the stress of running the trauma center, the constant danger of their life. But when she missed her second period, she couldn't ignore the possibility anymore. She took the test in the medical suite, using equipment far more sophisticated than necessary for a simple pregnancy test. But she needed to be sure, needed absolute certainty before she told Ji-hoon something that would fundamentally change their world. Positive. 12 weeks along, according to the ultrasound she gave herself with shaking hands. Right around the time of their wedding, when they'd been careless in their passion, too caught up in each other to think about consequences, she was carrying Kang Ji-hoon's child. A baby that would be born into a world of violence and blood, but also love and fierce protection. A child that would be heir to a criminal empire, but also to a legacy of redemption and change. Sarah sat in the medical suite for an hour, staring at the ultrasound image, trying to figure out how to tell her husband he was going to be a father. He'd said children weren't possible in his world. But then, they'd already done the impossible, hadn't they? A doctor and a crime lord, building something beautiful from darkness. She found him in his office, going over territory agreements with his lieutenants. The moment he saw her face, he dismissed everyone, his attention immediately focused on her. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, I need to tell you something. Ji-hoon was in front of her immediately, his hands on her arms, searching her face for answers. Are you hurt? Did someone threaten you? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah watched as they penetrated, as understanding dawned on his face. His hands moved to her stomach, trembling slightly, and the expression on his face was something she'd never seen before. Wonder, terror, and love all mixed together. A baby, he breathed. Our baby. Are you angry? You said children weren't possible. I said that before you. Before I understood that with the right person, anything is possible. His hands were gentle on her still flat stomach. A baby, Part you, part me. Something clean and perfect coming from all this chaos. It won't be easy, the danger will be managed. I'll burn the world down before I let anyone hurt you or our child. He dropped to his knees suddenly, pressing his face against her stomach. Mine, both of you, mine to protect, mine to love, mine to build a better world for. Ours, Sarah corrected, running her fingers through his hair. Ours, he agreed, and when he stood to kiss her, there were tears on his face. You've given me everything, Sarah. Your love, your trust, and now a future I never dared imagine. How do I thank you for that? By staying alive, she said seriously. By being there when this baby comes. By helping me raise them to be better than either of us. I promise. Whatever it takes, I promise. The final months of Sarah's pregnancy coincided with massive changes in Ji-hoon's empire. He consolidated power, eliminated threats with surgical precision, and built alliances that would ensure their child's safety. The trauma centers expanded to 5 locations across Seoul. The trafficking rings were systematically destroyed, replaced with legitimate shipping operations that still made money but didn't trade in human misery. Sarah worked until her 8th month, when Ji-hoon finally put his foot down and insisted she rest. She compromised by training her replacement at the center and consulting from home, unable to completely step away from the work that defined her. Their son was born on a rainy Tuesday in October, 1 year and 3 months after Sarah had knelt in an alley and saved a dying man. The labor was long and difficult, and Ji-hoon never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering words of love and encouragement in Korean and English. When the baby finally arrived, screaming and perfect and absolutely beautiful, Ji-hoon cried openly, unashamed of the tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. He's perfect, he whispered. Just like his mother. He has your eyes, Sarah murmured, exhausted but euphoric. Poor kid. Lucky kid. He'll be able to terrify his enemies with just a look. Ji-hoon laughed, the sound full of joy and disbelief. What do we name him? They'd discussed names for months but hadn't been able to decide. Now, looking at their son, Sarah knew. Daniel, she said. It means, God is my judge, seems appropriate for a child born into our morally complicated world. Daniel Kang, Ji-hoon said, testing the name. Strong. International. Perfect. Just like his parents' love story, Sarah said with a tired smile. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard Ji-hoon talking to their son in a low voice, making promises about the world he would inherit, the life he would lead, the choices he would have that his father never did. Sarah woke to find Han holding Daniel while Ji-hoon sat beside her bed, watching her with those intense dark eyes that had captured her from the very beginning. Regrets? He asked softly. Never, she said, reaching for his hand. This life, you, our son, our strange little family, it's everything I never knew I wanted. Even with all the blood, all the moral compromises, even with all of that, we're building something better, Ji-hoon. Maybe not good by conventional standards, but better. And that matters. He kissed her hand, then her forehead, then her lips with infinite gentleness. I love you, Dr. Sarah Kang. And I love you, my morally ambiguous crime lord. Mama, Papa, Han said dryly, your son is hungry, and I don't have the equipment to help with that. Sarah laughed, reaching for Daniel, who was indeed beginning to fuss. As she fed him, Ji-hoon's hand on her shoulder, Han standing guard like the loyal protector he'd always been, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 1.5 years ago, she'd been alone, disgraced, running from a life that had collapsed around her. Now she was a wife, a mother, the director of 5 trauma centers, and somehow, against all logic, happy. Truly, deeply happy, in a way she'd never expected to be again. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more violence, more moral compromises, more moments when she questioned the choices they'd made. But there would also be love, fierce and protective and all-consuming. There would be lives saved, children protected, small victories carved out of a dark world. What are you thinking about? Ji-hoon asked, his fingers gentle in her hair. That alley? Sarah said. If I'd taken the main road that night. Don't, he said softly. We found each other. That's all that matters. A doctor and a crime lord walk into an alley, Sarah said with a small smile. Sounds like the beginning of a bad joke. Or a love story, Ji-hoon countered. The best kind. Unexpected, impossible, and absolutely perfect. Daniel made a contented sound, and Sarah looked down at him, this tiny perfect life they'd created from their impossible love. Yeah, she agreed, meeting Ji-hoon's eyes over their son's head. The very best kind. Outside, Seoul glittered in the afternoon sun, unaware that high above in a penthouse that had seen so much blood and darkness, a different kind of empire was being built. One founded on love that shouldn't exist, redemption that came from unexpected places, and the belief that sometimes, the most beautiful things grew from the darkest soil. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real, complicated, morally ambiguous, and absolutely, perfectly theirs. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Love found in the darkest places, hope born from impossible circumstances, and the choice, made again and again every day, to build something better together than either could have built alone. The beginning,